Welcome to our deep dive into the world of Stephen Covey's The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
It's a classic.
Yeah, it really is. And we're going to be looking at some excerpts that you chose from the book and really kind of dig in and explore Covey's approach to personal and interpersonal effectiveness.
Right, and it all boils down to this interplay of character and principles and habits.
All right, so let's jump right in.
It sounds good.
Covey, right off the bat, draws this distinction between the character ethic and the personality ethic.
Yeah.
And it seems like so much, of self-help kind of focuses on those surface-level personality tweaks.
Exactly. And Covey argues that if you're only focusing on, charm or techniques or, trying to have this positive mental attitude, but you don't have that solid foundation, it's kind of
I love where this is going.
you're trying to navigate Chicago with a map of Detroit.
Yeah.
You can try all you want, but you're going to end up lost.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
It really drives it home.
You can't just slap on a new personality and expect to be effective.
Right.
It's got to come from a deeper place.
And that's where the character ethic comes in.
Exactly.
So you can think about it like farming. You reap what you sow.
Right.
There's no shortcut to a good harvest.
There's no quick fix.
Yeah.
It's really about cultivating those core principles, integrity, honesty, fairness,
Yeah.
that really form the bedrock of true effectiveness.
Okay, so it's really about who we are at our core, not just how we present ourselves to the world.
Exactly.
And this kind of reminds me of Covey's concept of paradigms.
Oh, yeah.
Those mental models that we use to make sense of the world.
Absolutely. Covey emphasizes that the map is not the territory. Our perceptions aren't always accurate reflections of reality.
Right.
And, we can really hold on to these inaccurate paradigms that lead us to make ineffective choices.
It's like those optical illusions where you see one thing and then suddenly your perception shifts and you see something totally different.
Right.
It's such a great visual for how our paradigms work.
Yeah. And what's interesting is that Covey uses this really personal story about his son to kind of illustrate this.
Yeah.
He talks about how he and his wife, initially had this paradigm that their son was inadequate.
Oh, wow.
And this belief actually influenced how they interacted with him. And it highlights just how deeply ingrained our paradigms can affect, not only our own behavior, but the people around us.
Oh, that's pretty sobering.
Yeah.
It makes you kind of want to examine all your own assumptions about people.
Exactly.
Especially, the people that you're closest to.
Especially those closest to you.
And speaking of growth and development, Covey introduces this concept of the maturity continuum.
Right.
He argues that we move from dependence to independence and finally to interdependence.
Yeah.
It's almost like learning tennis,
Right.
First, you're dependent on your coach. Then you can play solo.
Right.
But to reach a higher level, you really need to learn to play doubles.
Right.
You have to be able to rely on a partner.
Exactly. And I think a lot of people get stuck in that independent stage.
Yeah.
Kind of afraid of that vulnerability and collaboration.
Yeah.
But Covey argues that, true effectiveness often lies in embracing that interdependence.
Yeah.
And leveraging the strengths of others.
So true.
Yeah.
Skipping steps on that continuum only leads to frustration and setbacks.
Right. We need to master each stage before moving on to the next.
That's so important.
Yeah.
Now, this brings us to the PPC balance.
Oh, yeah. One of my favorites.
I know.
The goose and the golden egg.
Yeah. Which Covey illustrates with that memorable analogy. So can you explain that?
Sure. So the goose represents our production capability.
Okay.
Meaning, our skills, our assets, our relationships.
Right.
The golden eggs represent the output, the results we achieve.
Right.
So if we only focus on the golden eggs, on constantly trying to get those results, we might neglect the goose.
Yeah.
Our health, our relationships, our overall well-being.
That's so easy to do.
It is.
Especially in today's world.
Right, where everything's go, go, go.
Yeah.
But, we end up just burning out our goose.
Right.
And that leads to diminishing returns in the long run.
Think about it like a manager who's pushing his team to the limit to achieve those record profits,
Right.
might look great in the short term, but what's left behind is, a burnt out team.
Totally.
A company culture in shambles.
Yeah. Have you ever seen this happen?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think all of us have seen it.
Where have you seen that PPC balance play out in your own life?
Oh, yeah. So many examples, but we're not going to bore everybody with those today.
Okay, fair enough.
Let's dive into the habits themselves.
Well,
starting with habit 1.
Be proactive.
Be proactive. It's all about recognizing that we have the power to choose our response to any situation.
Absolutely. Covey stresses that we are responsible, meaning We have the ability to choose our actions
Right.
and our reactions no matter what the circumstances.
So it's not just about, like putting on a happy face or something.
Right.
Like if something bad happens to you, it's like,
No, it's about realizing that you still have that power
right.
to choose how you respond.
Okay, so this is where Covey introduces this idea of our circles of concern and circles of influence.
Right.
Yeah, and proactive people focus their energy on their circle of influence.
The things that they can control.
Right, while reactive people get so bogged down by their circle of concern.
Right. They're wasting energy on things that are totally outside their control.
Yeah.
Covey actually suggests this 30-day proactivity challenge.
Really?
It's fascinating.
I love that. So you spend 30 days consciously focusing on solutions rather than dwelling on problems.
And it can be really powerful.
That's an amazing idea.
Yeah.
And to illustrate this concept, he uses the story of Joseph from the Old Testament.
Yeah.
He faces just these incredibly difficult circumstances.
Right.
But he chooses to focus on what he can control, his own actions and attitude.
Yeah. It's a powerful example of how you can be proactive and lead to positive change.
Amazing.
Even in the face of adversity.
Yeah. Okay, so being proactive really lays that foundation.
It does.
But where do we direct all that proactive energy?
That's where habit 2 comes in.
Begin with the end in mind.
Exactly.
All right, so tell me about this one.
So it's about having this clear vision of where you want to go in life and making choices that are aligned with that vision.
Yeah.
Think about it like building a house.
Yeah.
You wouldn't start construction without blueprints, right?
It seems so obvious
Yeah.
when you put it that way.
But so many of us just go through life without a clear plan, just reacting to whatever comes our way.
Yeah, just kind of like wandering around aimlessly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Covey highlights this by talking about the two creations.
Okay.
First, there's the mental creation, envisioning what we want to achieve,
Right.
defining our values and goals.
Okay.
And then there's the physical creation, the actual execution of those plans.
Right.
So he's saying that so many of the problems that we have in life stem from a lack of clarity in that first creation.
Oh.
We just rush into things without really taking the time to define what we want.
So this isn't just about setting business goals or, planning a project or something.
Okay.
It's really about taking that time to define like a personal mission statement,
Absolutely.
that clear articulation of your values
Yeah.
and what you want to accomplish in life.
Have you ever done that?
I've started it and kind of gotten off track,
It can be tough,
but it is a really powerful exercise.
and it's never too late to start.
So true.
Think of it like writing the program for your life.
Yeah.
You're the programmer. You get to define the code.
I love that.
So once we have that clear vision,
Yeah.
how do we translate it into action?
That's where habit 3 comes in.
Put first things first.
Yeah, this is where the rubber meets the road.
This is where the magic happens.
Yeah, tell me about this one.
So it's about effective self-management,
Okay.
learning to prioritize
Mm.
tasks and activities in alignment with our values and goals,
So we're not just talking about like time management here.
right? It's not just about managing our schedules.
Okay.
It's about managing ourselves effectively.
Yeah.
He draws this distinction between, that third generation of time management,
Okay.
which focuses solely on efficiency,
Okay.
and the fourth generation, which emphasizes effectiveness,
Hmm.
recognizing that the most important tasks aren't always the most urgent ones.
Oh, that's a great point.
Yeah, and he tells this really funny story about his son
Oh, yeah.
who tried to have this efficient breakup with his girlfriend.
Really?
He scheduled this short phone call,
Oh, no.
thinking it would be quick and painless.
Of course.
But emotions don't really work on a schedule.
You can't just schedule those.
Exactly.
Right.
So the conversation ended up lasting way longer
Oh, I can only imagine.
than expected, and they both ended up just feeling frustrated.
And that's such a good example of how, like, we need to be mindful of that human element.
We do.
Especially in matters of the heart.
Right.
That efficiency isn't always the best approach.
It is.
It makes me think about, how we try to, like, schedule quality time with our loved ones?
Right.
But it's not just about, like, fitting it into our calendars.
Exactly.
It's about being present and attentive when those moments arise.
Yeah.
Even if they don't fit neatly into our plans.
Right.
Now, Covey's time management matrix with those 4 quadrants.
Oh, yeah.
is such a key part of habit 3.
It is.
Can you explain that?
Sure. So he categorizes activities into 4 quadrants.
Okay.
Quadrant 1 is urgent and important.
Okay.
Those are crises and pressing problems that demand immediate attention.
Okay.
And quadrant 2 is important but not urgent.
Okay.
So those are activities like planning or relationship building.
Gotcha.
Preventative maintenance, things that we often neglect because they don't have those immediate consequences.
Yeah, those are easy to put off.
And then there's quadrant 3, urgent but not important.
Okay.
Those are those interruptions, distractions, and busy work that just eat up our time.
And then quadrant 4
is not urgent and not important.
So that's like
wasted time.
So it's pure and simple.
Pure and simple.
So the key takeaway here is to spend more time in quadrant 2.
Yes. Spend as much time as you can in quadrant 2.
Right. These are the activities that are crucial for long-term effectiveness.
Right.
But they often get pushed aside because they don't seem urgent.
Exactly. Covey encourages us to really be proactive about this schedule time for quadrant 2 activities.
Yeah.
Even if it means saying no to some of those less important but seemingly urgent things in quadrant 3.
Yeah, that's hard.
It is.
But it's so important.
It is. And he also talks about delegation as a powerful tool for managing time and empowering others.
Right. It's about trusting others to handle tasks effectively so that we can free up our time for those high-impact activities.
Exactly.
Now, before we delve into habits 4, 5, and 6, the habits of public victory, Covey introduces this really powerful metaphor that's going to be super helpful as we explore those habits.
What's that?
The emotional bank account.
Oh, one of my all-time favorites.
I love this one.
Yeah.
So it's basically like a financial bank account.
Right.
Instead of money, we're dealing with trust.
Yeah.
Okay, so we make deposits through acts of kindness, courtesy.
Keeping commitments.
Genuinely listening to others.
Right.
And these deposits build up this reserve of trust.
Exactly.
That allows for greater flexibility and understanding in our relationship.
Right, and then of course withdrawals happen when we're disrespectful.
Yeah.
When we break promises or dismiss the other person's feelings.
If we're constantly overdrawing that account, the relationship suffers.
Yeah, it's inevitable.
It makes me think about, all the times I've unintentionally made withdrawals.
It happens to all of us.
In my relationships.
Yeah.
It's a wake-up call to be more mindful of my actions.
Absolutely.
Covey uses a great example of some shopping center managers.
Oh, yeah, I love that.
Who initially focused on, like policing their tenants and enforcing all the rules.
Right.
But when they shifted their focus to really building relationships and addressing concerns proactively, they saw this dramatic improvement in tenant satisfaction.
And overall business results.
So they started seeing problems as opportunities.
To make deposits.
To make deposits in that emotional bank account.
It's a powerful reminder that investing in relationships isn't just this nice to have.
Right.
It's essential for achieving true effectiveness in any situation.
Where we're dealing with people.
Dealing with other human beings.
So true.
All right. So are you ready to dive into those public victory habits?
Let's do it. I'm excited to see how these principles play out in our interactions with others, but we'll save that for the next part of our deep dive. Okay. So we're back and ready to explore those habits of public victory.
The public victory habits.
Which, as you mentioned, really shift the focus from personal effectiveness to interpersonal effectiveness.
Right, from me to we.
Yeah. And habit 4, think win-win, seems like the perfect place to start.
It does.
So tell me about this one.
So Covey argues that, a lot of people are kind of conditioned with this win-lose mentality, where they see life as this zero-sum game, where one person's success comes at the expense of another.
But isn't that kind of ingrained in our society?
It is.
Like we're raised to be competitive.
Right.
How practical is it to really embrace win-win in a world that, so often feels like it's designed for winners and losers?
Well, it definitely requires a paradigm shift. But Covey really believes that it's essential for achieving true effectiveness in our interactions with others.
Okay.
He points out that win-win is more than just a negotiation technique.
Okay.
It's a total philosophy of human interaction.
Wow. Okay, so it's really about believing that there's enough out there for everyone.
Exactly. He calls this the abundance mentality, the opposite of that scarcity mentality, where you're constantly feeling like you're competing for a limited piece of the pie.
Yeah. So how do we break out of that win-lose program?
That's the big question.
Yeah, and start operating from a win-win paradigm.
Well, Covey suggests focusing on 3 key character traits.
Okay.
Integrity, maturity, and the abundance mentality.
We've already talked about integrity aligning our actions with our values.
Right.
Maturity in this context is about finding that balance between courage and consideration.
Yeah, having the courage to stand up for what you believe in,
right,
while also being considerate of the other person's perspective.
And of course, cultivating that abundance mentality, believing that one person's success doesn't diminish the possibilities for others.
Absolutely.
And this is where the emotional bank account comes into play.
Yes, it does.
So we need to be building trust through consistent deposits to create a climate of win-win.
Exactly. When there's a high level of trust, people feel safe to be vulnerable, to communicate openly, to really work together to find solutions that benefit everyone.
So important.
It is.
And Covey says that dealing with someone who has a win-lose mentality is the true test of win-win.
It is. That's when we need to be especially proactive about building that relationship, listening empathetically and seeking to understand their perspective. But, sometimes even with our best efforts, win-win isn't possible.
Right. So that's where no deal comes in.
Exactly.
Recognizing that sometimes walking away might be the most empowering choice.
It might be the best option.
Yeah.
It's not about forcing a win at all costs.
It's about respecting yourself and the other person enough to recognize when a mutually beneficial agreement just isn't possible.
Okay, so.
Now, if we are able to establish that win-win mindset, the next step is to define the specific terms of the agreement.
Okay.
And this is where Covey talks about win-win agreements.
Yeah, which really move beyond those traditional top-down management styles.
Okay.
It's about focusing on desired outcomes and empowering individuals to take ownership of their work.
Rather than dictating every step of the process.
Exactly.
I love the story that he shares about the green and clean agreement he made with his son. It wasn't about, micromanaging how his son mowed the lawn. It was about setting that clear expectation for the desired outcome.
The end in mind.
A clean yard.
Yeah.
And trusting his son to figure out the best way to achieve it.
It gave his son that freedom to be creative and take initiative. And it really taught him valuable lessons about responsibility and problem solving.
This idea of focusing on results rather than methods is so powerful.
It is.
And it really ties back to, that concept of empowering others.
Absolutely.
Making deposits in their emotional bank accounts.
Right.
And fostering that sense of ownership and responsibility.
Yeah. So are you ready to move on to habit 5?
Absolutely.
Seek first to understand, then to be understood.
This habit is all about empathic listening.
It is.
Which sounds simple enough, but I think it's human nature to want to just jump in with advice or solutions before really taking the time to listen.
We've all done it.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Covey compares it to diagnosing before prescribing. You wouldn't want a doctor to just throw pills at you without first understanding the root cause of your symptoms, would you?
That's such a good analogy.
Yeah.
Yet we do this all the time.
All the time.
In our communication.
We rush to offer solutions or advice.
Right.
Without truly understanding the other person's needs or concerns.
So what does empathic listening actually look like in practice?
It's about listening with the intent to understand, not just to reply. It's about putting yourself in the other person's shoes.
Yeah.
Trying to see the world through their eyes.
So it involves paying attention not only to the words being spoken, but also to the emotions and the unspoken messages behind those words.
Exactly. And Covey emphasizes that true understanding requires more than just techniques. It flows from a foundation of character and genuine caring.
Right.
He says that the most important ingredient we bring to any interaction is not what we say or do, but who we are.
So if we're coming from a place of authenticity and integrity, people will sense that.
They will.
Be more open to communication.
Absolutely.
And he shares a really poignant story about a wife who felt unheard and unimportant in her marriage.
Yeah.
And even though her husband provided for her materially and offered logical explanations for his actions, he wasn't truly understanding her emotional needs.
It's a powerful reminder that we need to go beyond that surface level listening. And connect with the other person on a deeper emotional level.
So empathic listening is about creating that safe space for open and honest communication.
Exactly.
Building trust and understanding.
It's the foundation for resolving conflicts and strengthening relationships.
So true. And once we've genuinely sought to understand the other person's perspective, we then have the responsibility to make ourselves understood.
Absolutely.
So this involves expressing our own thoughts and feelings clearly and respectfully,
Right.
in a way that invites understanding and collaboration rather than defensiveness.
Yeah, and that leads us to habit 6.
Synergize.
Synergize.
It's all about creative cooperation.
It is.
Achieving something greater than the sum of its parts.
Covey emphasizes that synergy goes beyond compromise. It's not about finding that middle ground where both parties give up something.
Okay.
It's about creating that third alternative.
Oh, interesting.
A solution that neither party could have come up with on their own.
He uses the example of a couple planning a vacation.
Right.
The husband wants to go fishing in this remote location.
Yeah.
And the wife prefers a more social vacation with family.
Right.
So instead of compromising on a destination that neither of them is excited about, they take the time to really understand each other's needs.
And they come up with this solution that meets both of their needs.
Okay.
A place where they can fish and camp,
Right.
but also be close enough to family to enjoy some of that social time.
That's a great example of how synergy can lead to solutions that are better than any of the initial proposals.
Yeah, it really is.
So achieving synergy requires this willingness to value differences, to see those differences as assets rather than obstacles.
Absolutely. Covey says that sameness is not oneness. True unity is about appreciating and leveraging the unique strengths and perspectives of each individual.
I love that. And he also argues that the key to interpersonal synergy is intrapersonal synergy.
Right.
So in other words, we need to be whole and integrated within ourselves before we can effectively synergize with others.
Yeah. And he tells a story about a couple that was struggling with communication.
Yeah.
Because they were coming from very different paradigms. The husband was very left-brained, analytical, and logical.
Okay.
While the wife was more right-brained, intuitive, and emotional.
Right.
And this led to a lot of misunderstandings and frustration.
It's a reminder that we need to be aware of our own communication styles.
We do.
And be willing to adapt to the needs of the other person.
Absolutely.
So before we jump into habit 7, which focuses on renewal,
Nope.
I'm curious, have you ever had an experience where you were able to achieve a truly synergistic outcome?
I have. And it was in a work situation where we were facing this really challenging problem.
Yeah.
And initially, there was a lot of tension and disagreement.
Of course.
But we made a conscious effort to really listen to each other.
Yeah.
Understand the different perspectives and to brainstorm creatively. And we ended up coming up with this solution that none of us could have imagined on our own.
Well,
it was truly a case of the whole being greater than the sum of its parts.
That's a great example.
Yeah.
It really highlights the power of synergy.
It does.
Now, are you ready to explore habit 7?
Yeah, let's do it.
The habit that Covey says is the key to sustaining all the others.
Sharpen the saw.
All right, so we're back, and I'm excited to dig into habit 7. Sharpen the saw, this is the one that Covey says is essential for keeping all those other habits going strong.
It really is. You know, it's all about recognizing that we are our own greatest asset. And that we need to continuously invest in our well-being.
So it's not just about, like going hard all the time. No. It's about taking the time to renew and recharge so that we can actually be more effective.
Think of it like a lumberjack trying to cut down a tree with a dull saw.
Oh, yeah.
It takes way more effort and the results aren't as good.
So sharpen the saw is about making sure that our saw is sharp.
Right, that we're taking care of ourselves.
So that we can show up as our best selves.
And Covey breaks down self-renewal into 4 dimensions.
Okay, I love this part.
Physical, spiritual, mental, and social-emotional.
Let's start with the physical. What does that involve?
So that's all about taking care of our bodies.
Yeah.
Through proper nutrition, exercise, rest, stress management.
So it's about building that physical stamina and resilience that we need to really face life's challenges.
It is. And, I think we often try to just push through when we're feeling depleted.
Yeah.
But neglecting our physical needs only makes things harder in the long run.
Yeah, I know. I've definitely felt the effects of neglecting this dimension when I'm not taking care of myself physically. It impacts everything. I'm less patient, less focused, and definitely less effective.
It affects all areas of our lives.
Yeah, so true. Now, the spiritual dimension is about connecting with our core values and beliefs.
Right.
Finding that sense of purpose and meaning in life.
It's about nourishing our souls. Finding those practices that help us align our lives with our deepest values.
Yeah, this dimension is the one that I sometimes struggle with the most,
Yeah.
It's easy to get caught up in the day-to-day and lose sight of the bigger picture.
It is.
So Covey suggests things like meditation, spending time in nature, engaging in meaningful service.
Right. Those are all great ways to connect with that spiritual dimension.
Then we have the mental dimension.
The mental dimension.
Which involves expanding our minds and our perspectives.
It does.
So this could involve like reading, learning new skills, engaging in thought-provoking conversations, or just taking some quiet time for reflection.
It's about keeping our minds sharp, challenging our assumptions, and staying curious about the world around us.
I love that. And finally, we have the social-emotional dimension, which focuses on nurturing healthy relationships.
Absolutely.
This is where those public victory habits come in, seeking win-win solutions, listening, empathetically synergizing with others.
It's all connected.
Yeah, it's about building those strong emotional bank accounts that we talked about earlier.
Exactly.
So Covey emphasizes that these 4 dimensions are interconnected. Neglecting any one area will inevitably impact the others.
He uses the analogy of an unbalanced organization.
Okay.
If a company focuses solely on profits and neglects its employees, it'll create this toxic work environment, which eventually leads to decreased productivity and high turnover.
And it's the same with our own personal ecosystem.
It is.
If we're neglecting one of these dimensions, it's going to throw everything else out of whack.
It will.
So thinking about your own life, which dimension needs the most sharpening right now?
That's a great question. I think for me, it's probably the physical dimension. I've been spending a lot of time focused on work and not enough time taking care of my body.
Covey actually suggests dedicating at least an hour each day to activities that sharpen the saw in all 4 dimensions.
Really?
He calls this the daily private victory.
The daily private victory.
So it's about creating that rhythm of self-renewal that allows us to live more effectively and joyfully.
That makes sense.
And he argues that this daily private victory is really the foundation for achieving the daily public victory. Having the energy and resilience to build stronger relationships, contribute more meaningfully, create positive change in the world.
So it all comes back to that inside-out approach.
It does. We have to start with ourselves.
Yeah.
Cultivate that inner strength and well-being, and then we can really effectively interact with and influence the world around us.
I like that.
Now, as we wrap up our deep dive into the 7 habits, I'd love to leave our listeners with something to ponder. Covey wrote this book before the internet.
Yeah.
And the constant connectivity that we experience today. So how might these technological advancements impact the application of his principles?
It's a great question.
Do they make the 7 habits more or less relevant in today's world?
We'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, leave us a comment. Let us know what you think.
While the world has changed dramatically since Covey first published this book, I think his principles remain timeless.
They do.
And offer a really powerful framework for navigating the complexities of modern life.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the 7 habits.
This has been a pleasure.
We hope you found it insightful and empowering. And until next time, keep sharpening those saws.